speaker, Nicole. It's very cool.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi, Andy. Thanks for joining
Hello.
us today. Good to see you.
Nice to see you.
And Karen and John.
Hello there.
Hello. Is that Nancy? Marilee, nice to see you.
Hi, nice to see you.
Oh. Okay, well, everybody, please go ahead and place themselves on mute. I will go ahead and get started so we can stay on time. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Happy Wednesday for our 27th Lunch and Learn. I can't believe we've been doing this for 27 weeks. And so a couple of Zoom rules to get started if you haven't joined us yet. And please mute yourself when you're not speaking. We recommend speaker view for presentation. Please, video sharing is optional, though we love to see all your friendly faces. And please type all questions and comments into the chat. We will have an amazing guest speaker today, Nicole Dauz, joining us all the way from Canada. She's our second international speaker that we've ever had for our Lunch and Learn series. We're very excited. And also special guest HPF board member Justin Nahama, who will be speaking with Nicole during this time. So we will have a Q&A at the end. If you have any comments during their presentation or their discussion, feel free to type them in the chat. A quick update from Autism Tree. We have now reached over 467,000 people through our social media channels. This is everything, all of our platforms, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. We have also, our posts have been shared 772 times, which is amazing. Thank you to everyone who has been sharing our posts, what we're doing, reaching more people so more people can feel connected to our community and what's going on. We have 277 HPF videos on our YouTube channel, so please subscribe today if you haven't. It takes 1 minute, it's free, and 227 of those videos have been shared since March 12th, which is really exciting, all from our community. So thank you to everyone who has submitted a video. If you would like to submit a video, we have a couple series going on. Our HPF at Home series, which is activities for kids and families, and they can range from 1 minute to 5 minute videos of just fun ideas to share with our families. We also have our Reading with Autism Tree series, which is, we've posted 85 videos and impacted over 42,000 just through that, where our volunteers read a children's book to our kids. We have now provided 143 virtual events today, almost 150, and we have 15 events coming up between now and the end of October 31st. And of course, now we are offering 19 of our 20 programs. 18 of them are currently ongoing in virtual platforms on Zoom. And then we had one in person, our Bridge to the Beach program, back in July. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Dana Hoff. She's our co-founder and volunteer executive director. And she has, she'll do a wonderful introduction for our wonderful guest speaker today. Thank you, Rebecca. I'm always so honored to be here with you, and really jazzed that to have our board member Justin on here, as well as our second international speaker. I'm really thankful that 27 weeks into this, we keep having I think new opportunities to learn together. And last week I shared a daily devotional book that I look at each day, but also right before I come on here. And I just thought it was interesting that today's was the battle within, and I kind of thought that was interesting, given what our topic's going to be today. And one of the things it said is, don't be discouraged if you cannot escape the struggle within. I can't imagine that we all don't have times where, just with every aspect of this global pandemic, we don't feel somewhat that our 724 trillion cells in our body are having trouble sometimes just managing all of that. So what a blessing that we can come together once a week and
just continue together to remember to count our blessings. And the truth is that that's how we've been doing it at Autism Tree. We couldn't do it without you. And there's not even one day that we haven't had multiple blessings to count. And I just, wow. So with that, I want to say I'm really blessed that Justin brought Nicole to Autism Tree. Welcome again, Nicole. And we always start with a question, and I thought this was pretty relevant given the speaker today and what she's going to talk about. If you could type in, how do you show you care? If you haven't been on our Lunch and Learn before, we do a follow-up email about our Lunch and Learn today after it. And it's really nice to have your name and sort of like your voice. For me, I would say, how do I show I care is I do it by being really present with Autism Tree families and my own family every day. How do I show I care is by taking action when I know someone in my family, either my personal family or my Autism Tree family, is really struggling. I will do something. And I think I'm really convinced that action is just so much more powerful than words, though words are powerful. With that, I want to show a video, and I think it really captures that, is the actions that we take and how healing it is. And here's 6 ways I thought was a great reminder how to show you care. Do it. Yep, that's what I was saying. Do it. Don't say it. You know the old common wisdom, actions speak louder than words. I think that's, for some reason, even more true during this shelter in place. 2, refuse to argue and pick your battles. 3, apologize often, even if you are not wrong. 4, do something unexpected. 5, sharing is caring. And 6, wake up every morning with an appreciation for the other person. Here's the video I picked out with you in mind, Nicole. I hope you enjoy it too. Hi, Terrence.
Hi, sorry I was muted. Hello there.
Raise your child. Flip. There you go.
I don't know about you guys, but that certainly reminded me of quite a few of my loved ones. And I don't know if any of you have family members that are going through Alzheimer's or dementia or those kind of things, but caregiving is such a wide spectrum topic, and I'm just really grateful that Nicole can bring some wisdom and light to it. And I picked out this quote with you in mind, Nicole. Caregiving often calls for us to lean into love we didn't know possible. With that, I want to show just a couple pictures because Nicole is new to our ATPF family today. And thank you again, Justin, for being such an incredible catalyst to bringing new experts and new heartbeats to Autism Tree. And with that, I just want to give you a really warm welcome, Nicole, and say thank you for bringing this presentation and this really important topic to us today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much. Yeah, Rebecca, if you want to just put the first slide up, I guess the second slide, sorry, yeah, I mean, working with caregivers, I love speaking with parents, especially of kids with autism, because I think there's just this unspoken connection that we can really relate to. And, part of that is, play on these slides of, these beautiful photos of my daughter, Summer, and my son, Jordan. And, ideally, this is what my life would look like every day. But Rebecca, if you go to the next slide, this is my reality. And I'm sure the reality of all parents who have children with autism. And today, Justin and I are really going to dive into, acceptance of the role of being a caregiver. And I think that part of that is when people stay in their ideal life of what they want their life to be and really don't appreciate the reality. And I know for myself, because I nursed Summer for a full year, it was just her and I on the rocking chair. And so during those times, you think and you're projecting, and it's like, mother-daughter, what are all those things that we can do together? And so I know for me, when Summer was a year old and we realized that things were going to be very different and her life would be very different, it took me a few years to really accept the role. I mean, I dove right into the therapies, the physical therapy and the occupational therapy, but I think really processing what my life was really becoming. And I had tricked myself into saying, well, things will improve, things will get better. And then at every step, there's just something new that showed up. And so, we're talking about stress and overwhelm during COVID, but I think just generally as caregivers, it's so important to accept our role. And because it took me a few years, it was really a moment when I realized that things weren't getting better. And that was like the one time when I was feeling too much stress and too much overwhelm. And that was really the start of my journey on my self-care, or for self-care. And I know Justin and I are going to have more of a discussion. So I'd love, Justin, for you to jump in now, because my question for you is, was it something that was gradual for you, accepting your role as Caleb's dad? Or was it something that, you remember the moment when you realized, oh, like my life is different than I thought it was going to be?
No, thank you. And thank you, Dana and Rebecca, for your kind words too. I'd be remiss, Nicole, if I took credit for bringing you to ATPF when I have to give a quick thank you to Andy Kramer, who's on the Lunch and Learn as well, who was really the connector for us. And just so our ATPF family knows, Andy connected me with Nicole at a time where I was having a lot of difficulties, both personally and with school for my son. And so Andy, thank you so much for making that connection. Nicole, to answer your question, you said a few years. I'm going on 10 years and counting for the acceptance piece, and I don't think I'm quite there yet. I feel like every time I start to get my footing on solid ground, there's a new challenge that happens. As recently as a week or two ago, after a 3-year battle with Caleb School District, got him into a much better school with better resources, but now we're back arguing with them about whether he can push into other classes with the COVID challenges and integrating students in different cohorts, because he is in a district right now where they're back in school with certain safety measures in place. But I think the acceptance piece, to answer your question, is very difficult, just because our children's needs, in my experience, is kind of a moving target. And then we also have external circumstances that we can't control, with folks who are kind of limiting and not necessarily facilitating access to the resources that I've needed for Caleb over the years.
Okay, fair. I think from an acceptance piece, it's more really, I think, coming to terms with that your life will be different, and appreciating that, you know, every moment and every day can look a little different. But for me, once I allowed myself to accept that I was a caregiver, and that because my daughter has special needs, it was going to be a lifelong journey, then actually allowed me to address some of the emotions. So, and I think that's like the connector, is if we don't even accept the role, then all of those things that go with that role just remain buried. And for me, my first emotion was the grief. And actually, like, you know, realizing that ideal mother-daughter relationship, you know, Summer playing sports and me coaching her, like all of those things that I had thought of weren't necessarily going to take place. And then all of the other emotions, like anger and resentment. And then as a caregiver, you feel guilt for feeling angry that you have a child with special needs. Like, I thought I was being, at the beginning, punished. Like, I went through all of those things I did in my, like all of the, just the bad things I had done in my life, quote unquote. And it's like, oh. And so like, that was even part of the acceptance, to kind of come to a point where I realized, oh no, this isn't a punishment. That in fact, this, like, having Summer is a gift, and she's going to be teaching me lots. And so, I mean, why do you believe, though, acceptance, even though you're saying it's a journey for you, we've had the discussion of acceptance is so important. Why do you think that is?
I think you said it really well. And I guess the only addition I would make to your sentence about not being able to do things is, you know, it's just, you don't know. There's so much unknown from the caregiving perspective, where, using your example of coaching teams, every year that goes on is different. And I think that it may happen, just not in the way that we thought. And so I think there is a grieving process there that happens that's very difficult. And to answer your question, though, I think that, you know, going through that process helps you recalibrate how your expectations are looking ahead. So, for example, just personally, in the past, when my son Caleb was really young, I would like hold my breath that he would have a good day out and about somewhere, whether it was just going to like the dentist or going to get new shoes or a family event, and it would never go as planned. There would always be challenges, but I had kind of set myself up for failure by not having that kind of foundational acceptance. And so now, coming much farther along, which is far from perfect, but better through, you know, your help and our ATPF community, you know, there's so much that the acceptance, I think, can empower you to do by managing your own expectations. And so when those things do happen, they're not as, I'll call them, they don't feel internally almost like punishing, where you have that anxiety and you're overwhelmed. And so I really do feel strongly that acceptance, which is not like a switch we turn on and off, it's kind of a daily affirmation for me. Is, you know, and one of the things that you taught me that I use every day is, you know, when my son is having those difficult moments, is just reminding myself it's not his fault. It's not his fault, and it's not necessarily a choice that he's making. And that's kind of been a significant release valve for me in those moments when, as a father, as a former Marine who's used to a certain way of discipline, as an athlete, none of that stuff works when dealing with my son. And so I know it's simple, but kind of your mantra there has been an absolute game changer for me in those moments when things are really, really difficult, which I think circles back to acceptance.
Okay. Actually, thank you for bringing it up, because that's a good segue for the mantras into, you know, what I love to share around emotions and feelings. And I do this because it gives permission to caregivers that, you know, I always start like, we're humans. And part of being human is having emotions. And I think at the beginning, we're flooded with so many emotions. I mean, in the kind of the primary circle of emotions, there's like 8 main emotions, and like 6 are negative and like 2 are positive. So I mean, like right off the bat, like, you know, we're like, it's a deficit. So it's, I think, understanding that emotions are innate and that we can't control them, and feelings just come from a different part of the brain, and we can control the feelings. It's our reaction. So like when speaking with caregivers and tips, it's welcome the emotions when they arrive instead of beating yourself up and feeling guilty for having them in the first place. But it's, you know, those 1 or 2 seconds of acknowledging when the emotions arise and then how we react. And so because humor is a great coping mechanism for myself, I talk to myself. So like the other day I got really, really upset because Summer did something, and I was just like, oh, hello, anger. And that was just like enough of like to diffuse that, like I didn't lose it. And then I actually went to my mantra. So in addition to, you know, it's not her fault, I also I just like remind myself to breathe. And then as I've shared, I just say, I love you, because, you know, and I'll say like that super fast, and I'll just repeat, I love you, because, and I say these, I'm usually holding Summer in these instances. And so it's actually a calming effect as well for both of us. But it's just enough time to help me manage my reaction, because, you know, as caregiver, there's so little we actually control. And I think that's like part of like the umbrella of, you know, caring for ourselves, is we always believe we have so much more control than we do. And then we become a caregiver and we realize, oh, this entire human being whom I've created, I now like apparently have no control over. And then COVID arrived. And then it was that reminder, like, oh my gosh, I have no control that schools have been closed. I have no control that I no longer work. I am now a full-time caregiver. And so these are huge stressors. And it's funny that the only thing we can control is our, like, how we think and how we react. Yet that's the hardest thing for us to do. So I know like you've been home as well. So what's the biggest thing you've learned about yourself during COVID when related to mindset, like the choices that you're making?
In all honesty, I think it was the realization that I actually wasn't doing it right for so long. You know, with being home for an extended period of time, it wasn't like, okay, the kids and my neurotypical daughter Jade, they're here and they're gone,
Yeah.
and you kind of create that space to decompress. But with having them here, there's more challenges stacked, you know, challenge after challenge. And so, you know, and so for me, I realized, to your point, which I think is really powerful, Nicole, is that I wasn't creating the space to even identify those initial emotions. And just taking like a half-second pause in there and realizing that even though that's the emotion that I'm feeling, which a lot of the time wasn't one of the 2 positive ones, but just creating the space and then realizing that I actually had the choice of what I chose to do with that emotion. And the mantra I mentioned before, where it's not your fault, that really is what was the buffer for a second or 2 that gave me that space just to realize that I don't have to act on that particular emotion. And I don't want to be presumptuous, but I would suspect that as caregivers, our patience has been tested, because while we can't understand when our, you know, kiddos or loved ones have difficult moments, you know, that's compounded on the life stress we're already facing with our work responsibilities, with the unknowns of COVID and all of that. And so, you know, we kind of have this like Jenga game stacked, you know, on top of, stress being added to it. And I think it's very difficult. So kind of that was a long-winded way of saying, the biggest thing that I've learned about myself is I wasn't creating the space to be able to identify those motions and not directly allow them to kind of dictate my reaction to when situations were difficult with my son.
Okay. But I mean, that's really interesting because that's all about self-awareness, which is, I think, another, like, it kind of like awareness with the mindset, they kind of go hand in hand, because if, like, so often people will feel all of these negative emotions, and if they don't, like, even yourself being able, like, to go back and kind of look at how far kind of you've come, or even recognizing that, like, you're going to have good days and bad days, right? And I think part of the discussion for people to understand is that, I'm talking about the ideal reaction, and it doesn't mean I do that every day. Like Saturday morning, Summer got up at 4, and at 6:30 in the morning, I had to come in my office, and I just had to not scream out loud, but just like mouth the words, "Shut up," only because I need to release that, because she was fussing, and I was like, it's 6:30 Saturday morning. How am I going to get through the day? And so, just sharing a very real moment is, a mantra maybe isn't going to work all the time. And like, that's what I strive towards, but it's recognizing at that moment, I made the conscious effort is I just need to leave the room. My daughter's not going to hear this, but I knew enough that I needed to release that. And I think that's like part of that self-awareness, and having just a lot of compassion and grace for ourselves, because as you had said about patience, some days I have tons of patience and it doesn't matter what Summer does. I'm like Teflon. I'm like, okay, bring it on. And then even my son, like both of them. And then there's other days where like, Jordan can breathe too heavy. It's just like too much for me. And so I think that's, part of it is, kind of, being able to even laugh at ourselves and realizing that it's not linear and it's not like a checkbox. It's like, oh, I've got my emotions down. Okay, check. I think that was, for me, one of the things about COVID that I learned is I was reminded of how messy caregiving is. Because I thought, oh, I have like my stuff together. Like I've, done all of this work, and then COVID hit, and I was so surprised at how many negative emotions were coming up during the first 2 months. And that's basically took me 7 weeks to accept that I was going to be a full-time caregiver, and that I had no idea how long it was going to last, which is really scary. But I mean, that's, I think, another part of our role as caregivers is, figuring out in our life what we can control and what we can't control. And so, I call it a control audit, because I find when caregivers are feeling lots of stress and overwhelm, it's because they're focusing on controlling something that they have no control over, but they don't realize it at the time. So even that simple question, because you're like, well, that's so simple, but you can kind of, what can I control? And then what can I control? And that can't list is really, really long, but then you realize, oh, there's a whole bunch of things on that can't list that I've been trying to control. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And I love the point that you made too. And I am one of the like worst offenders here, is when there is a rough day or moment, it tends to snowball. And it's very difficult to compartmentalize that where there's a new day, and it's not like my son is making a choice to, struggle with things each day and, and compound, but that's what it feels like, from the parent perspective. And I think COVID threw a wrench in that, because at least before COVID, we kind of like structured our lives around the week and the weekend. And, COVID just, hit the nuclear detonate button on that. And so now, without having the like traditional time constructs that we have, For me, it's been more difficult, at least initially, before kind of finding a rhythm, if you could call it that, with COVID, is trying to start fresh each day and not letting one particular challenge spill into another. I mean, I think my son rebounds faster than I do from some of the challenges and meltdowns that he has, where he's moved on and I'm still like, you know, pardon my French, but like, holy shit, you know, things are still kind of like spinning and trying to make sense of it. And so to your point, I think it's critical to, you know, I guess to give yourself permission and be kind enough to yourself to take things day by day, especially when our concept of like time is just kind of stood on its head through all the COVID challenges.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and given that, you know, I care so much around self-care, our caregiver role is simply that, is a role. So I'll just use you as an example. So you're a caregiver, you're a father, you're an employer, you're a son, but most importantly, you're Justin. And I think it's so easy to forget that, because the caregiver cape can feel very heavy and very smothering. And it's very easy to forget yourself in the process. So how are you carving out, and how are you managing, like, just in time during the stress and the overwhelm of COVID?
Well, you know that I struggle with that, so I appreciate you asking me on a recorded lunch and learn. But it's a work in progress, and it's starting. I've realized that I can't start big with it, and I have to start small. So what I'm doing right now is I'm carving out a half hour every day to read something that's not related to work. And for me, whether it doesn't always work out because of the 4 a.m. wake ups that you can't plan for when I want it to happen, but just having that half hour of quiet time, I think is incredibly valuable. And so, you know, between that, to create a little bit of a reprieve on the mental side, and then I also think on the physical side is incredibly important. And I'm not getting to the gym as much as I'd like, but even things like taking, you know, a bike ride, or I took a long walk this morning, you know, with my dog, creating, you know, a little bit of quiet time and physical, just you know, without distractions, I think is key, because we always have so much noise coming across our brain frequencies during the day with work and the kids and everything else, that between just starting small with like walks and bike rides or reading for a half hour every day, I have felt a lot better. Still a lot of work to do. But for me, it's been starting with something small and sticking to it, to try to get the ball rolling.
No, I think that's great, because I think that's part of it is, for me, self-care is, you know, doing anything that brings you joy. And what I try to focus on is removing the barriers. So you don't need to leave your house. You don't need to invest money. You know, for some people who need to like stay in the same room as their child, you don't even need to leave the room. It's starting small. And I always approach it, instead of, you know, focusing on 24 hours a day, I'll say, like, there's 1,440 minutes in a day. Can you find 15? And I find, like, when I say that, like, caregivers are like their shoulders drop, and they're like, that seems so much more accessible to them than, you know, trying to focus on 24 hours. So, you know, if you have 30 minutes, that's wonderful. Because I like to start like with 15 minutes, and then you just kind of build from there, and it's a momentum thing. And the nice thing is, like, once you start doing it, and if you can carve out that time, as you said, it's a mental break where it's a gift to yourself, because you're just doing something, and it can be whatever. And this is what I like to remind the caregivers is, there's no right or wrong way to do, like, for self-care activities. And when I share activities, it's just to, you know, provide inspiration, to plant seeds, and, you know, what activities Justin does and what activities I do, they can be completely different, but it doesn't matter. They're so unique to the individual. But it can just inspire other people to try. So whether it's, you know, meditation, my cat is a huge source. When I read, my cat will always jump up on my lap and purr. And so, like, that in itself for me is part of my self-care routine, or going for a walk, or journaling, you know, texting with my best friend, all of these things just, yeah, allow for us to not think about our caregiver role. And it allows us to really remind ourselves that we are important, and that hopefully the more we do, the more often we can fit self-care activities into our day, then the more we can do. But realizing that we don't necessarily have control over our day, as you had mentioned, you know, I do refer to my kids as my little dictators sometimes. So my self-care plan, I have weekly activities and monthly activities in addition to daily activities, recognizing I'm not going to see my friend every day, but I know at least once a month I need to see her face to face for connection, so we can check in. During COVID, we've almost been doing it weekly. She's in my bubble, but again, it's just allowing ourselves, or recognizing what are those activities that we like to do and how can we carve them into our schedule. So yeah, I know that that's a big part of what I love, you know, sharing with caregivers, is really giving them permission to take care of themselves. And that without the acceptance role, though, it's really hard for caregivers to even consider self-care, because it's not on their radar. They're not there yet. If there's so much they haven't addressed. And so that's why I think acceptance is such like the first step in a caregiver's journey toward self-care and caring for themselves.
No, and I totally agree. And Rebecca, if you could put up the last slide in Nicole's presentation, that would be awesome. And I know that we want to turn it over to answer any questions folks may have, just because this is something like each of these issues we could probably talk about for 2 or 3 hours, because there's so much to unpack. But we want to make sure that we give everyone an opportunity to ask Nicole questions, just because she's a subject matter expert here and has a really wonderful platform to help us kind of get the ball rolling during these crazy times.
Yes, that was actually my favorite quote from Buddha. But yeah, like, you yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. And in closing, it's, you know, we are such amazing advocates for our kids. And it's just reminding caregivers, you know, if you can love yourself and advocate for your own well-being as much as you do for your kids, you're going to be so much better off. And I know, Justin, you need to jump off now.
Yeah, well, in true like caregiver dictator fashion, my kids are out a little early from school today, so I have to head out in 5 minutes. And so I'm gonna like fade into the daylight at some point. And can't thank you enough, Nicole, for coming on. But in the meantime, I'm gonna stick around for a minute or two, just to listen to any questions anyone may have.
Will you take our group photo now so Justin's in it?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
We'll do that.
Thank you, Justin, for being here.
Sure, of course.
Everybody, if you want to turn your cameras on, you can. It's optional. I will take a screenshot. Big smiles. 1, 2, 3. Beautiful. Awesome. And we'll open it up to questions from the audience. You can type your question in chat and I can read it out loud for you, or you can go ahead and unmute yourself as well.
And while we're waiting for the first question, Nicole, I mean, one of the things that was helpful for me is what is an actionable first step for folks? And I don't want to, if anyone has questions that are coming in, please skip mine and go to theirs. But while we're waiting, would love to know your thoughts on kind of just getting the ball rolling with this process, which is a lot easier said than done.
First step as part of their self-care?
Yes, as part of like a self-care with trying to figure out how we're kinder to ourselves, kind of navigating all of the unknown that's going on. Like, where do we start? Because not all of us are as fortunate to have like Andy's connecting us to Nicole's. And so. Oh,
sorry. I was just gonna say I would say start with looking at your day, and I would just start with 15 minutes. and like, don't overthink it. Think of one thing that where you kind of say, oh, I wish I could do that, and you've just been putting it off. So it could be having a hot cup of coffee every morning in silence. It could be, you know, going for a walk. And it's just, it could be like even watching your favorite show. Like if you have a comedy, like something that makes you laugh, like something that makes you feel better, do it. And I think that's what's not too, I think that's so often people overcomplicate it. And I think that's part of it. Just choose an activity, 15 minutes, and do that for a week and see if that's the right activity. If not, you can change it up, try something different. You can reach out to another caregiver as an accountability partner, say, hey, and just like check in if you have the time. If that's too much pressure for someone, don't do it. And I think just build on it. I know people I have friends who love to knit. And if they can like carve out 20 to 30 minutes every day, like that brings them so much joy. And so I think, so thank you for the question. And I really would start there, because I think even taking the time to think about it in 15-minute blocks and just even allow yourself to like dream about things that you like to do will actually just pivot you, and then like the next week, you're going to start thinking of all these things that you had never even allowed yourself to think of before. And then it's like you then have like a buffet of self-care activities that you get to choose from. Is
there a process or like a framework that you recommend for all of this, or any resources as far as like books or other things that can be helpful?
Well, from a framework perspective, I actually ask people to go back pre-kids. And I'm like, what did you do before you had kids? Like, how did you spend your time? What did you do that you enjoyed doing? I mean, it's like so rare that we tell people to look back, because you're like always look forward, but that's the one instance, because I find that can provide so much inspiration for people. Before asking like the caregiver like to read a book or anything like that for frameworks. Yeah.
Love both of those.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I'll go ahead.
Rebecca, I think you're on mute.
Oh,
okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Awesome. Those are really great questions. Justin, you stole my question about different resources. I love Nicole's answer. That was great. A couple of stuff from the chat that people have been posting. I love, and some more ideas. Francisca, thank you for joining us. She says, hello everyone, very timely topic. Thanks so much. I have an 8-year-old son with autism, and what really helps me is starting the day with a workout.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is Emily, another mom. She said, this is part of my self-care, which is training our lunch and learns each week. So thank you for whoever posted that. Tamar, she said, that's a great idea, Nicole. Everybody says wonderful presentation. I think that's pretty much what really resonated with me the most that you said, Nicole, was the control audit portion of it, of what I can and can't control. And usually when I'm most stressed, I realize it's because I'm trying to control the parts that I really can't control. And I love that, those ideas of, I use, tea in the morning, basically, make myself a hot cup of tea. And that's how I get my, 15 minutes a day, just, gravitating towards that. So, oh, wonderful. Francisca also said, a suggestion for a future presentation, nutrition to help deal with stress. That's great.
Yeah, no, I could talk. Yeah. The control audit is, I think, an important thing to realize. It's not just about your caregiver role. Like, going back to, like, I've been Nicole for 47 years. I've been a mom for 14, and I've been a caregiver for 12. So my role is to honor Nicole first. And so with the control audit, I've realized now that my son is 14, I don't have as much control as I thought I did. So even that in itself, when we're talking about stress and overwhelm, and I know so many parents of kids with autism, they have other children as well. I mean, talk about a whole nother, oh, actually next week, I'm really excited to hear about the sibling workshop. But I think that's part of the control audit, is really looking at all aspects of your life and not necessarily just in your caregiver role, because, you know, all of those things, you know, impact who we are as a person. And so that's, I guess, wanted to like share that insight as well.
Beautifully put. Beautifully put. Thank you, Nicole. We did have one more question. If anybody wants to hold on, we are at about time, but there was one question that Cindy just asked. What if you are unable to get sleep not more than an hour at a time and no more than 3 in a day with a sick child that is crying, and you know it will end in about 6 to 8 months, but how do you remain calm and do self-care? Do you have any tips you'd like to share with her, Nicole?
Sending lots of love to you, Cindy. Yeah, Summer had colic when she was, when she was a baby. So this is where mindset, I think, comes in. And I would go back to the mantras again. And especially, you know, regrets never helpful for anyone, but when I realized how important energy is, and I think back to when Summer was younger and I hadn't fully accepted my role as a caregiver, and I sometimes wonder if she was responding to my energy. Because I was still in the resentment and anger phase. And I believe there was a change in the connection Summer and I had once I fully accepted my role. And so I share that, Cindy, because if you can start those mantras when you know your child is that young, you're so ahead of the game. And it's just you know, telling yourself how much you love your child, how, you know, thankful you are, gratitude. Oh my goodness, we just celebrated Thanksgiving in Canada, and you know, we didn't even touch on gratitude today, but that is an important part of my self-care routine, is being grateful for where I live, just my health, my children. I have so many blessings, and it's, you know, with everything going on in the world, it is easy to focus on the negative. And even with my daughter's behavior and all of that, there still is a lot to be thankful for. And I would just share, Cindy, that if you can really think of the people and the things that bring you support and that offer you you know, joy, that those would be the things to really remain calm. But I love that you were saying it will end in about 6 to 8 months. I just share that don't get that too stuck in your head. And the only reason I say that is that a good friend had said to me over the summertime, Nicole, you keep saying when Summer goes back to school in September, she said, there's a chance schools won't reopen and you will be mentally crushed if your daughter doesn't go back to school. So it's maybe, I would share, don't think about it's going to end in 8 months, because if 8 months comes and that behavior hasn't changed, then that it may not, just from an expectation perspective. So just kind of say, I can get through this. I am, you know, a warrior, like, and I use that language all the time with myself. Like when sometimes too, it's like, I created, like I've created 2 human beings. It's a freaking miracle, right? I created them, I birthed them, and it's like I can do amazing things. And so sometimes when things get really difficult, that's the one thing I can cling to, is that I can get through this. And so I just share that with you as well, Cindy, that you can get through this. You're part of a larger community, and that just know that you're not alone.
if it's okay, I first want to say, Cindy, we missed you. Nicole, Cindy is coming from Pennsylvania, and we missed having you, and congratulations on your new granddaughter. I did want to tell you, I was thinking about what Nicole was saying, and having a similar experience with Garrett. When he was young, he just really didn't sleep, and it wasn't his fault. He just wanted to be active, and we did all these brain studies, and his brain was firing at night. So I had to really do all those things, and one thing that really helped, but when the early years, I didn't know that he had autism. So, you know, he didn't get diagnosed till 2 years and 9 months. So that was 2 years and 9 months of not knowing. And then once we started digesting and accepting autism, it really helped me when Todd started calling me the Chief Garrett Officer. It helped me accept things and kind of let go of my corporate, you know, role, and transition out of the dreams that I had for my career, and really do the things that Nicole was talking about in terms of looking in the mirror and saying, okay, if my baby's having a bad day as he got older, okay, I need to look at myself. And the more that I was sort of like out of control, or not managing the day well, or not preparing him for the day, like what we were going to do, it wasn't a good day. So then I started evolving as he got into elementary school, of like, okay, I can have a really big impact on our day. And that is by staying calm, you know, being in the moment, but also trying to have somewhat of a plan, and also keeping him in the loop on it. Like, okay, we're going to go to Cindy's house and show a picture of Cindy, you know. But when they're babies like that, I think everything you said, Nicole, in terms of just, that is one thing I did when Garrett was little and not sleeping, is think about how thankful I am that, you know, he was at home. A lot of babies don't get to come home. Like, just start with that, and then start with just every little part of him, the baby that's healthy, and even being a healthy, if the mom's healthy, just that you could be home with your baby. I mean, there's just, you know, so many things that happen when a mom has a baby, which we're talking about, that first stage of life. There is so much to be thankful for, even though it's really, really difficult. But I think writing down things that you're grateful for, even though it's hard because you're sleep deprived, there's no doubt about it. But I'm grateful, Cindy, that I know that you're there for your daughter and granddaughter, and I like that you're trying to put it in a chunk of time. But I do think it's kind of great advice Nicole gave you, to maybe not have like 8 months as a marker, so that there's not just extreme disappointment if that doesn't happen at 8 months, you know. But I just want you to know I miss you, and I'm so glad you're on this call. And Nicole, you made me think of everything a lot when you were talking about all that. I agree with everything you said as great advice.
Oh.
Anyone else? There's a lot of parents on here. Anyone else have some words or experience for Cindy?
Well, we're just at about time. So if anybody wants to share anything, please reach out to me. You can email me. I'll send a recap email with Nicole's personal, her business information if you want to learn more about all of what she offers, and if you have any questions for her directly, I'm sure she'd be happy to hear from you. So with that, thank you so much.
I want to ask you guys all one question. This is for Cindy directly. Cindy, can we put a little picture of you and your granddaughter and daughter in our follow-up, so we can all be keeping you sending extra love and prayers to you guys? Would that be okay?
Yes, she says yes.
Yes.
You, Cindy.
Yes, I'll send you a picture.
Okay, do you want to share anything about Nicole and Isla, your new baby?
Oh, do you want me to show you one now?
Yeah, if it's okay. I want you guys.
But I can send you one.
Okay.
I'll send you one.
Okay.
But
We'll put it, with your permission, Rebecca will put it in the follow-up, so everyone can be keeping the baby
Okay.
in our prayers.
Just not on Facebook because
No.
they don't, but I'll show you a picture of her if you can. Oh, it's hard to see. You probably can't see. I'll send the picture.
It won't go on Facebook. It'll just be in the email, follow-up email.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. I just feel bad because she can't lay her down. She has something where the esophagus doesn't close. And so there's acid reflux every time she eats. But because she had a hematoma, had to be sucked out. She had bleeding on the brain and this hematoma. So, and she has to eat every 2 hours to get rid of the high levels of bilirubin. It's just been like one thing after another. And so she can't lay down at all. So she can't, so she only sleeps sometimes on my daughter's chest. And I'm just worried about her not getting her self-care in order to continue to maintain what she's doing. So I did help for 8 days. I came back. And then she sent me a text saying, if I need to, can I come here? And I said, absolutely. So.
Yeah. Well, sending you extra love, Cindy.
Thank you.
Need anything from us, please let us know. And
Thank you. I appreciate it.
thank you to everyone who wants to surround Cindy and her daughter with some extra love. All right. Well, thank you, everyone for joining us. Thank you, Nicole, again. And special thank you to Justin, too. We just loved everything that you said. This is so needed during this time. And we're so happy to connect with you and stay in touch.
Don't miss John waving the Canadian flag on here, guys. If you got the gallery up, John's wave. Thank you, John, for waving the Canadian flag. I love it.
Thank you, guys. And thank you, Nicole.
Happy
Oh,
Wednesday.
you're welcome.
Have a great week, everyone.
Thank
Okay,
you.
bye.